the reason why we have a market conditions addendum is because no one can predict what's going to happen in the real estate market. If we're being honest with ourselves, we can look at past data, we can look at future data. There's all kinds of reports that we can definitely look at. I just think that if we're being honest with ourselves, none of us really know what the next 6 months to a year holds. So unless you have some type of crystal ball that you're going to pull out here.
I got it, man. I got the crystal ball.
The crystal ball looks pretty empty to me. So.
Welcome to the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast, where nothing is off limits. If you're interested in buying, selling, or investing in real estate, and you want to learn some of the insider secrets and uncensored truths from the true professionals in and around real estate, you've come to the right place. Now, let's buckle up for the uncensored truth about real estate and join your host, Brian Cardenas.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast, where nothing is off limits. And we wanted to bring in somebody today that we have worked with for a few years now, and we have a ton of respect for his opinions. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. I mean, I don't know. He has opinions, so we still respect them. But we wanted to bring on Dayton Toombs today. He is with HomeSmart Lifestyles. And Dayton, wanted to welcome you to the show, first of all.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I know a lot of times when we have a conversation, it kind of goes off in a lot of different directions, and it goes on for quite a while. So I think we'll have no problem talking today and keeping things going. But I like to start things out with, just kind of trying to help the consumer. That's the overall goal here. And in doing that, we want to know, what is something that you find in your experience that a lot of either buyers or sellers don't really understand about real estate or don't know, and they really should know?
There's a lot of different thoughts and ideas that come to mind because, obviously we do it for a living. So we know a lot of the intricacies of real estate, if you will, where, the average home buyer and home seller, if you want to look at statistics, average, they move on every 5 to 7 years. Is typically the average is what they're saying. So they don't have this experience very often. This is an experience they're going to have, and some people live in their homes forever, so they may not ever have that experience again. So because it's something that we do for a living, one of the things that stands out to me, because I get to see all different aspects of the real estate industry, and I work with a lot of clients, one of the aspects that sticks out to me is, have you interviewed a real estate agent that sincerely cares about your goals and your family and where you're going and what you're going to be transitioning into? Because selling your house and buying a home really is the first step, right? But that transition and the process takes a little bit of TLC and care from the agent. So what I like to see, and if I was a potential buyer or seller, I would like to listen for those key points. If I say something about what my family's goals are, I want to hear that acknowledgement from whoever I'm talking to. I want to know that they care about my goals and what I'm trying to accomplish. Because if you find the right agent that cares, the transaction may get tough at times because you have only so much control, but you'll have someone that'll fight to the end to ensure that you achieve that goal.
And that's a really hard thing for the consumer to do. Like, what is the best way for them to try to make that determination? Real estate agents are salespeople. There's some people that can put on a really good sales pitch at the beginning, and then once you get involved with them, it just doesn't go as you thought it was going to go. Like, can you give some tips on maybe ways that people might be able to make that distinction before it gets too late? And then also, like, if they get into it and they find that they're not a good match, like, what are the options that they have?
Well, so to be fair to all the agents out there, because I've experienced it myself, there's sometimes, no matter what you do, the transaction can go south. It's just the nature of the beast. So I want to be careful to make sure that incorrectly, assess all agents out there. But the best agents have some of the toughest transactions. So keep that in mind as we're having this discussion. One of the key points is are they listening to you? Are they listening to what you're saying? Or are they just trying to get down to business? If you're one of those buyers or sellers that, don't really care about getting close to the agent, just, hey, I want you to sell my home. I want you to help me find a home. That's it. I don't want you to care about my kids. I don't want you to care about nothing else. That's perfectly fine. You may find that out there. But if you're someone who does care about being represented by someone who sincerely is in tune and really wants to see you be successful, it's important that they're listening to the things that you're saying. If schools are important, they're taking notes. They should also be able to reiterate to you some of the things that you may have discussed before. That's how you know they're listening. If you have to constantly remind that agent the same thing over and over again. If your last name is Cardenas and they keep calling you something else, something like that. Like if they're not really invested and they're not listening to you. And because it's such an intricate, I would want to say serious transaction, those are really important factors to having an agent, someone that's listening to you, someone that cares about your success, someone that's going to do everything they can to ensure that you achieve that goal. That's important.
I was just going to say, so I'm if I use the barometer of who's going to screw up my last name as a deciding factor of who's good and who's not, I wouldn't have any friends or anybody.
Hey, see, once again, you come to someone like me and Cardenas,
you care.
A very simple last name to pronounce. So see, it's very easy. It's not hard.
You give me the warm fuzzies, Dayton.
Yeah, you give me the warm fuzzies. Yeah. But that's so. You asked the second question. You asked what to do if you do run into that situation where you and the agent just aren't jiving. I think it's important to be transparent and open. All parties, to be very brutally honest with one another. My clients that I have the privilege of representing, throughout the transaction, I'm always asking follow-up questions. Hey, how are you guys doing? How's everything going? Outside of what I called them for, I will end every conversation with, how are you guys doing? Is there anything else you need from me? Is there anything you guys are having issues with right now? I'll also ask, is there anything that I could be doing better for you at this point? I want to know, because we have a very short amount of time together. And while you're in that transaction, your real estate agent is really one of the most important people in your life at that moment. Yeah. Right. So it's very important to make those distinctions, to make those connections, and to ensure that you're putting those feelers out there throughout the process, because what you'll find out is most people are just going to say, yeah, we're fine, because they don't want to bring it up. But what you will also find out is if you give them the opportunity and you make them comfortable in telling you what's going on at that time, you're going to find out a lot more. And it helps you become a better agent for them, because you understand what they're going through. Selling a home and buying a home is stressful, and like I said, you want to have someone there that cares about you, because there are going to be times where it gets rough.
And that's the thing, you mentioned that it's stressful. I mean, it's one of the most stressful things that people go through in life, buying or selling a home. And the agent can make such a huge difference in that process, because they do this for a living. They do it every day. And I think somebody like yourself that's asking those questions about how are they doing, like we try to do that in our process too, is check in with them. How's it going? Is there anything that you need? Like, I know it's stressful, and remind them that we know that it's stressful, and it's okay that if you've got some stuff going on, talk about it, because there may be some things that we can do or say to help you through the process, because nobody wants to go through something like that feeling like they're kind of on an island, or if husband and wife are maybe disagreeing about some stuff with the house, that happens too. Just to have another person to kind of bounce things off of can be really, really helpful.
Well, yeah, and the key to that is that the phrase that we use is that facilitate, don't dictate. So when your clients are having disagreements or they're coming into some issues, you provide them the information that they need to resolve those issues, but you don't dictate that information. I'm a facilitator. I facilitate the process. When I see hurdles, or I see roadblocks, or I see husband and wife having a disagreement, if I'm privy to that disagreement and if I have a viable solution, I will present that to them and allow them to decide how they want to handle it. Most of the time, the reason why there's disagreements is because people like you in the lending industry, you know what the process looks like from A to Z. In the real estate transaction, I know what the process looks like from A to Z. Your clients don't know. So some of that angst and some of that discomfort comes from the unknown. And if we're communicating with them on a regular basis, reaching out to them, even if you have nothing, hey, Brian, hey, I don't have anything for you today, but I just wanted to check in with you and see how things are going. And you know what? Even if there's nothing going on, I'm pretty sure 9 out of 10 times, you're going to give me something that I didn't have before I asked you that question.
Yeah.
And every bit of information that you receive from your clients that you're working with just allows you to better serve them. So,
somebody's in that situation, they tell their agent, hey, this isn't working out or whatever. So there's what we call a buyer broker agreement that some agents will have the buyer sign. Other agents don't have buyers sign it. Can you kind of talk a little bit about what that is, what the obligations are of both parties if you do that? And then if you don't, I know one thing that you mentioned about, being transparent, some people just kind of disappear and ghost you if they're unhappy with something. So can you kind of talk through that, the buyer broker agreement, how it works, what the obligations are, and then, what the right thing is to do, whether you have a buyer broker agreement or not on the buyer side of it?
Yeah, I've experienced a lot of different aspects of the buyer broker and the agent and the client making that commitment, to one another. I personally don't use the buyer brokers. If for some reason I have a client that's not happy with my performance and they want to move on to someone else, I'm not someone that wants to keep them from being able to do that if they feel like they're going to get better served with someone else. We always have to keep in mind as agents that it's not about us. It really isn't about us. If that client feels better with Brian as opposed to Dayton, and they're going to get better service with Brian, I'm all for that person going to Brian to get their needs met. That's okay. But the buyer broker, on the other hand, if the buyer signs that document, they are obligated to pay the agent a commission. That's a contract between the buyer's agent and the buyer themselves. So they're obligated to pay that commission if they sign the buyer broker. The right thing to do, and here's another aspect of it. If you showed that client 20, 30 homes and you wrote 6 or 7 offers, you're going to want to get paid for your time. You spend a lot of time, a lot of gas, fuel costs through the roof. You spend a lot of time away from home, driving around, writing offers. So you want to get compensated for your work. And maybe at that point in time, if there's a disagreement between both parties, maybe they can come to some type of an agreement together. It's all negotiable, but it all has to be discussed and it all has to be talked out. You got to get brokers involved, and it can go a lot further from there. If it gets worse, it can go to securing attorneys at that point, right? So you don't want to get into that situation as much as possible. Hopefully it's something that you as a buyer and the agent can work through. But sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. And you have to find an amicable way to part. And sometimes what that looks like is different depending on how far on in that relationship you are. If it's day one and you signed it and they did something that you don't like, you have a better chance of just walking away clean and moving on. But if it's day 60, that agent's going to have an issue with letting go at that point. So the best thing to do to try to avoid that is to make sure that you're patient enough as a buyer or seller to make sure you're asking the right questions for your specific scenario. That's what's important. If you're going to be selling a home and buying a home, you're going to want to make sure you have an agent that's well versed in that process, right? If you're moving out of state, you're going to want to make sure you have an agent that's well versed in those transitions in that process. So it really does depend on the individual needs, is what I'm trying to allude to.
Yeah, and so even if somebody is in that, there is the possibility that they could get out. But I think the expectations for the buyer that has signed a buyer broker agreement is that if the agent's done a lot of work, there's a good chance they're not going to be wanting to give up, getting compensated if it's early on. And I think that would probably be the good message to give is, if an agent is asking you to sign something right up front, think twice about it, because you don't necessarily know what their availability is, what their work ethic is like, what their competency is, and how you're going to get along with them. But if you're a little farther into it and you do feel comfortable that you've made the right choice, then that might not be, a terrible thing to do, just to show commitment from both sides. Because one of the challenges for you guys as agents is, buyers, nothing stopping buyers, unless they've got that agreement signed, to go out and have 2 or 3 different agents, showing them properties. What is the feeling about that? Like having multiple agents going out and doing home searches for people?
Yeah, from my experiences, with all I can speak to is that, I just rely on providing the best possible service as I can. I rely on communicating with that client to the best of my ability. When you do cold calling or you get leads from Realtor.com or Zillow, like, you're literally talking to strangers. These people don't know you at all. So you really only have a small window of time to make them feel comfortable with you. And that's how I secure a lot of my business, is just like showing empathy, showing compassion, and being invested in the people that I get the opportunity. It's a privilege for me. I see it as a privilege when someone selects me to represent them. I don't feel like I deserve that. It's a privilege. And that's how I conduct my business with my clients. I see it as a privilege, and I work that way with them. We're a partnership, we're a team. And there may be times where we don't understand one another, but I guarantee you that we'll get to a place where we do, just because it's not about me, it's all about them. I'm focused on them. So I don't deal a lot with buyer brokers because I don't use them. I've never used them, and I've never run into issues with them. In fact, I see very few agents that use the buyer broker. So I don't have a lot of exposure to those.
So what about when the consumer that's looking to buy a house, they're seeing advertising on TV, from certain agents or brokerages about, having listings that nobody else has, or having access to stuff that's not on the market? Can you kind of tell us what that really means? And is there a secret stash of homes that some agents have available that other agents don't?
Well, hey, the reality of it is, when I first started in real estate, I had a coach, and the coach would always tell me the only way you make money in this industry is by getting contracts signed. That's it. His whole focus was getting the contract signed. So like everything else, people have found very creative ways to get more contacts, more people in their sphere, more people in their databases. And you can give me any gimmick that you want to give me, but all those individuals usually care about is getting you to sign that contract, because that typically translates into a commission for them. So you got to be careful with some of the gimmicks out there. They sound good. They sound like, these commission, these low commission brokerages that are out there. It may sound like a great idea, but I'll never replace the gimmicks with taking the time to interview the right agent. And if you have 2 or 3 to interview 2 or 3. You don't have to be face to face with them all. They don't have to be in your home. You can interview them over the phone. You can interview them over the Zoom. Take the time to interview the right agent and make sure that your needs are being met. You get caught up in those 3-day sales, you get caught up in stuff like that, and we'll list your home for 2%. I see that all the time on TV. We'll list your home for 2%. What they're not telling you is that 2% is on the listing side only. They're not telling you that you're still going to have to do another 2 or 2.5% for the buyer's agent, right? So 2% on the listing side, that's all you see on the TV screen when that commercial comes up, is we'll list your home for 2%. And people are like, wow, just 2%. But talk to the people who made that phone call after they saw that commercial and discovered, yes, 2% for you. But when you read through the fine print and you got to the end, it ended up being a total of 4.5% to 5%.
Shit, the fine print gets you again. It's unbelievable.
Every time. So there's a lot of gimmicks. Real estate is about marketing. When you're trying to get people into your sphere and your database, it's all about marketing, how you market yourself. So if you're a good marketer, you're probably going to do fairly well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, I think, from the consumer side of it, it's so hard. You hear all these things out there, like you talk about, 3-day sale and whatever, and we've got homes available that nobody else has, or see homes first, or whatever these things are. Like, the reality is that people don't necessarily understand is that these coming soon properties, they're in the MLS. Any agent is going to be able to find those. There is not secret access, for one agent or one brokerage to the slew of properties. Like, you don't have to go to that particular company to be able to have access to those properties. I mean, the only ones realistically that you're not going to see for sure is for sale by owners.
Sure.
They're not going to be on the MLS. They might find them, on Zillow or something like that. But then, switching it over to the seller side of it, same type of marketing gimmicks, if you will. What would you say for the consumer would be the best way for them to get their house sold? Both not just quickest, but for, good price, the best price that they can. Because some of these things like really limit access to the property, and it just seems counterintuitive. Can you kind of talk about like what's the best way for people to get the most for their property and get it sold in a reasonable time?
Yeah, if you're one of those people fortunate enough to have time, because we also got to remember that not everyone who's moving is moving for a good reason. That's one of the things that we have in our mind that's so not true. Like, people can be going through medical issues, and they're moving. So they're dealing with medical problems while they're going through the stressful process of moving. So you can understand what that experience is like for them. That's where the empathy and the compassion comes out for people. We're in a people business. And every time someone's putting their home on the market, it's not because they're upgrading to go sell this house to go buy a nicer house, or they got this great promotion, so they're excited. Some people are moving because they lost a job, they lost a family member, they came down with an ailment. So we have to understand that every situation is different, and you can't go in with the same strategy for every person. That's one. Two is, if you're fortunate enough to have the time to know you're going to put your house on the market, and let's say you got 2 months to figure it out, you're going to put it on the market. If there are things wrong with the home that are going to detract potential buyers, like curb appeal, like if your front yard just looks like garbage, on the pictures, it may not draw people in. Take a little bit of time and effort, get your yard cleaned up, bring in a landscaper. If there's things inside the home that need to be addressed, if the house is dirty, if there's a lot of clutter, those are things that really do. You would think it wouldn't matter. You would think some buyers could see beyond these things, but that's not the case. Some buyers can't see beyond the way your house looks when they walk through it. And that aura, if you will, and that feeling of how you have that home set up can draw people away from you. So if you have time, declutter, get your front yard taken care of. Make sure the house is nice. Make sure it has a nice smell to it. Make sure it has a nice appeal, like a wholesome appeal. I tell my sellers to take some of the personal stuff down, the personal photos, so just, you want people to walk into your home all the way from the time they see the photos on the MLS, from the time they walk through your home. You want them to flow through that house and have a good overall feeling of it. So if you have some prep time, take care of some of those things that that need to be taken care of. Put a little money into it to get it ready to sell. And I think that always pays off.
What about people that have like bigger things to take care of? Not just be a few $1,000s, might be a bigger project, like really dated stuff. They haven't upgraded anything since the, early 90s or late 80s or something like that. And it's just not tip top shape. What options do people have for things like that?
Well, so a couple of things I always say over and over and over again. Everyone's situation is different, right? So like if you have a home that's dated and you're trying to sell it and get the most money for it, you're probably going to run into some issues with that strategy. But then again, do you have the money to go in and make a few upgrades? The answer is no. Then you're probably going to have to compensate a little bit with your listing price. Get it to a place where people understand it's dated. I'm going to have to put some money into it. So you may want to think about where you list the home at. And if your agent's doing a good job in providing comps that say this house sold for this amount, but it was completely upgraded, and your house is priced the same but not upgraded, yeah, you're probably going to run into some issues. So sellers in that situation need to be really honest with themselves. Can I get this much money for the home in its current condition? Once again, every situation is different. If I show you all the comps and the comps say your home being dated is not going to get you this list price, you have to think about that. But as an agent, one of the things I always have to keep in mind, it's my job to provide that seller the information that they need to make a logical decision for what their real estate needs and goals are. Okay? If they need to get out of the house within 30 days or 60 days, and your house is dated, and you want to get top dollar for it, especially right now in this current market, that's not going to help you achieve that goal. So what's more important for you? Holding out to get as much money as you can, or getting to your destination, or getting to your transition that you need to be to. Those are all things that we discuss in the listing presentation. And that's why it's important, and I'll go back to what we discussed earlier, to have an agent that truly cares about what you're trying to accomplish, because they're going to need to be honest with you about what you're trying to do. But even with that said, if Brian tells me, yeah, Dayton, I know my home is 30 years old and I haven't done anything to it, I still want to sell it for $500,000. Well, guess what? I'm going to list the home where you want me to list the home at. And we're going to let the market decide if it's worth that much. Because just as much as I'm telling you, Brian, look at the comps, your house is dated, there may be that one person out there who will pay that. So when you have agents telling sellers, hey, it's not going to sell for this much, that really isn't being truthful and being transparent with your sellers. They need to understand what the comps say. They need to understand what the implications of the appraisal may be. But I've heard these horror stories of agents telling their sellers, that's too much, we're not going to sell it. And then 2 days later, they get an offer. So that's like the worst possible feeling I could possibly think of, to say, hey, Brian, there's no way you're going to get this much for this house. And you tell me, Dayton, I'm starting at 500, and 2 days later, you get an offer for 500. That's like the worst possible scenario. So the seller always decides where they list the home. I just provide the information, and we work through those challenges based on what the individual needs are to make sure that they can meet their goals or meet their deadline. So there's no one size fits all. If anyone in real estate tells you, well, this is what I do, yeah, there's too many different variables out there that will change what I do because I'm paying attention to those variables.
So like in this market, obviously, the supply of homes is a big challenge. As we're recording this right now, our seasonal increase in home supply is happening. But what are you seeing as far as maybe some of the main concerns that sellers have right now with listing their property? I mean, we could definitely use more people listing their homes for sale, but what's stopping people from doing that?
Well, I think a part of it is just you're still speaking for Arizona at least, you're still in a hot market. You're still in a hot seller's market. I think a lot of people who didn't put their home on the market were just people who didn't want to deal with the challenges of listing and getting it sold in 20 minutes, and then having to go out there and find a property and compete with 15, 20 different offers on the table, right? Another thing is interest rates are starting to slow us down. I mean, you know this as well as anybody that, I got an offer on one of my listings and I saw the rate at 6.2%. The rates are going up, and that's changing things too. So days on market are starting to slowly climb up, and we're starting to see more listings. But I received a referral call yesterday, and the seller said, hey, we just want to take advantage of the market here while it's still hot. Cash out, rent for 6 months to a year, and then try to go find something else. And it seems like a plausible idea, on the surface, but that's what they decide that they want to ultimately do. So we'll see what happens.
Sounds like I need to talk to them.
Well, hey, the reason why we have a market conditions addendum is because no one can predict what's going to happen in the real estate market. If we're being honest with ourselves, we can look at past data. We can look at future data. There's all kinds of reports that we can definitely look at. I just think that if we're being honest with ourselves, none of us really know what the next 6 months to a year holds, unless you have some type of crystal ball that you're going to pull out here.
I got it, man. I got the crystal ball.
That crystal ball looks pretty empty to me. So, yeah. So I mean, it's a strategy that I understand. I understand what they're trying to accomplish, but we don't know what tomorrow looks like.
You want to buy a house, but high interest rates have got you down? Take the rate challenge and send us a verifiable loan estimate from another lender, and we'll beat it and pay for your appraisal up to $600. Here at Give Mortgage, being powered by U Mortgage allows us to provide you with unmatched speed and efficiency and the best rates and fees in the market, all while delivering you the concierge level service you deserve. We want you to have an experience getting a mortgage that you'll never forget, and not because you got put through a meat grinder to get it. At Give Mortgage, we give great advice, we give the best rates, and we give back to charity. Visit us at www.give-mortgage.com or call us at 480-331-4684 to schedule a free consultation to see how we can help.
I know one of the things that we've talked about, over the last few months is, what's happening in the market in terms of home supply and these institutional buyers buying up properties and affordability and things like that. What do you think, right now, like most of the time, the offers that get accepted on homes predominantly are either cash buyers or conventionally financed buyers. It's difficult to get FHA, VA, USDA buyers accepted. Not impossible. We certainly have it happen, but more often than not, a seller is going to be looking for a conventional financing or a cash buyer. Knowing that that's how things are, and especially the influx of all these institutional buyers, these hedge funds that are buying up properties, turning them into rentals. I know we haven't figured out the solution for that just yet. We're working on it.
No, yeah, we are.
In the meantime, what do you think about, like, should sellers be giving extra or special consideration to these buyers who are not using a conventional loan, like a VA buyer, FHA buyer, USDA buyer, or just somebody, even a conventional buyer that is financed, that's not an institutional buyer that's going to turn a property into rental, that, family or an individual that wants to go live in that house? Like, what are your thoughts on, should people be giving those types of buyers a little bit extra consideration with what's going on?
Well, once again, I'll always go back to each person has different needs. For the most part, what you're going to find is that the bottom line is the bottom line. That's the way it is for almost everybody. Hey, you have a FHA or a VA here that's 20 grand less than, your cash offer. Yeah, 20 grand is a pretty significant amount of money. It's really, for most people, it's the bottom line. How much money am I going to walk away with when this is all said and done? I can tell you right now, I had 2 VAs and 1 FHA offer accepted, in this crazy market. So people, and there was not one time where I thought that a VA, my VA buyers, were going to have an issue. The one VA buyer, it was 2 offers I wrote. I got the second one accepted. This last VA, we wrote 5 offers. I got the 6th one accepted. So the structure of your offer, knowing your buyers' possibilities and potential, how much money they have on hand, can they offset the appraisal to some extent? This is where it's important to have an agent, like I said, once again, who's going to do that work. Because what I did was I pulled up comps. I ran CMAs. I said, hey, look, this is about the ballpark the appraisal comes in at. So waiving the appraisal contingency really isn't an issue here, because we know where just about the ballpark it'll come in at. They have enough cash on hand. So all we did was waive the appraisal because we knew where it was going to come in at. And that worked flawlessly. The appraisal came in where we thought it was going to come in at. They only had to come out of pocket a little bit of money. So it really does depend on who you have representing you. Sure, a VA or FHA buyer in this current market may not be favorable, but the way you combat that is by having an agent that can look at your overall situation and know how to leverage those offers to entice that seller. And no matter how good you are at structuring those offers, at the end of the day, if the seller is more concerned about the bottom line and more concerned about getting to closing in the easiest manner possible, it doesn't matter what you do. But you may find that one seller that says, hey, you know what? I like this offer better. I've heard sellers that say, I want my home to go to a family. I've heard sellers say, I don't care. I just want the most money. So like I said, there's never going to be a one size fits all in real estate because there's so many factors and variables that go into that process that it's really hard to just put one label on.
So how does a buyer, how do you figure out like what kind of seller are you dealing with? Because you go into it blind, you don't know what the priorities are for the seller. What's the best way to figure that out so that you can construct your offer in a way that's appealing to them?
Yeah, well, in the current market, with how hectic it is, I mean, sometimes you just didn't have that much time. Like the listing goes on the market, if you're not there within 24 hours, you probably missed out on that one in some cases. But for me, I'm speaking for myself, I will call every listing agent that my client wants to put an offer in on. I mean, if you have a buyer's agent out there who's just sending offers in blind, they're not talking to the listing agent. They're not calling you saying, hey, look, I spoke with the listing agent and here's the information they provided to me. If you have an agent who's not doing that, they're really not working in your best interest because that information is crucial to know how to structure that offer. I call them every time. I call a listing agent every time, and every word that comes out of that listing agent's mouth has meaning for me and for my buyers. So I'm listening closely. If I'm in a position, I'm taking notes and I'm listening to what they say, and I call I'll call my client back and say, this is what I just found out. And believe it or not, that's how you get deals done. I'm on the phone with the agent. I'm talking to the buyers. I'm asking him, hey, what's your seller need? Okay, well, hey, they need a post possession for 2 weeks really bad. That's something that we can work on. Hey, you know what? They really don't want to take all their furniture with them. There's just certain things that they will give you that is always valuable in most cases. Either you're going to find out your buyer has a chance on this property, or you're going to find out your buyer doesn't have a chance on this property. Either way, both of those is information that you can use.
Yeah, that's so critical. Is to have that communication because, like you referenced earlier, I mean, this is a business about people,
Mm-hmm.
And if you make that connection with a listing agent, you can get a lot of information out of a listing agent oftentimes. Yes. And you can use that to your benefit. Not that they're doing anything wrong for their client, but it's just telling what are the motivations, what's the priorities, what are the things that are important. And you wouldn't know that if you're just looking at the listing. You've got to have a conversation with them to find that stuff out. And that's really, like you said, where you're really serving your buyers best is by doing that extra bit of legwork and, doing that research, getting that information so that you put it together the way that's going to work best for them.
Well, yeah. And so another piece of that is that, when I have listings and I receive an offer and I don't receive a text or a phone call or anything like that, it just comes in. It's a little surprising to me, but it's still an offer that I have to present to my seller. And going back to what you just said a second ago, it all depends on the quality of the questions that you ask the listing agent when you get them on the phone. Sometimes you may not get them on the phone. If they're really busy and they're taking tons of calls, you may not get a hold of them. And then that kind of tells you, what are we dealing with here? If I can't talk to this agent right now, what's going on? What kind of situation are they in? Or if I do get them on the phone and they're very polite and they're very talkative and I know the questions to ask, then I'm going to get the information I need. If you don't ask the right questions, you don't get the information you need. And that little bit of information that you get could be the difference between your buyers going under contract or your buyers going out there looking at the next 5 to 10 homes, which you're going to write multiple offers on. So it's very crucial.
So if you have a buyer that you're talking to and they're a little bit, undecided on the market, where we're at, what kind of advice would you give people right now that are just maybe on the fence about whether to jump in and start looking for a property?
Well, and like I said, I'll keep going back to this. It all depends on their individual.
You should be an attorney, man.
It all depends on their individual needs. I think because when it comes to real estate, one thing that I've learned is that I may be introduced to a client. You and I've had a couple of them that that we can refer to who may not be ready at the time that you and I talk to them. We always have that.
Sure.
But a year later, they're calling me. After they talk to you and after they got all their finances and everything in order, they're calling us back because we took the time to help them with the information that they needed to come to a decision. One of the things that happens when I talk to a buyer, I do a buyer consultation or I do a listing presentation. My whole goal in both of those scenarios is to present enough information to both of those parties where they can make the best decision for them and their families. That's what we're here to do. Sometimes that information leads them to say, now is not the time, based on their individual needs and their finances, right? You and I want to sell everything. You want to close loans, and I want to sell 20, 30, 40 homes a year. Like, of course I want to help them secure a home or sell a home. Of course you want to help them with their funding, but that's not what you and I are here for. You and I are here to provide them that critical information that they need to make the biggest financial decision they're going to make in their life. I have no problem talking to a potential seller or buyer and coming to a conclusion where we say, now is not the time. I'm happy with that because I help them come to that conclusion. But when you invest in them and you give them that information that they need and you stay in touch with them, when they're ready to make that decision, they're going to remember you because you help them come to that conclusion. And so that's all we're here to do. We're here to provide as much information to them, and then they decide what's best for them. So in this current market, with everything kind of slowing down just a tad, and that's based on area. You still go to Gilbert and Chandler and my parts of town, it's still a pretty heavy seller's market. But now the possibility of you putting your home on the market and finding another one, it's kind of more possible now than it was in 2 or 3 months ago. So if the rates aren't going to harm you and you're not worried about the 6% or 5.5%, I think if you're looking to sell or buy, it's still a good market to do so in. But you have to really base that off of your goals.
Yeah, obviously the individual situation is critical and the most important piece of that decision-making process. But you're right. I mean, with where the market is at, it's not normal yet. We're not in a totally balanced market, but it is off the crazy levels that we've experienced recently where you might have 20, 30, 40 offers. I'm not seeing that too much right now. You might still have a few, but the prospects of being able to sell and then go find a property and do one move, not have to do all sorts of creative stuff, is a lot better right now. So I think it's, if it's the right time for people financially, I think the market is getting a little bit easier to kind of conduct a normal real estate transaction.
Well, yeah, we're seeing that correction take place now. So we'll just see how long it takes for it to fully correct. But we're in those stages where it is. And I think a lot of people just held on. A lot of people were afraid to get out there and put their house in the market and get into these bidding wars and lose out, 5 or 6 times, 7 times. And, some people were practical. Like, you weren't the extra 20 or 30 grand that you were offering on top of the list price was to take out your competition. It wasn't for the value of the home. It was for you to take out your competition. So some people who have one of those fiscal minds just say, hey, I don't want to spend 20 or 30 grand just to beat everybody out. If I don't have to move, I'll just wait until that frenzy slows down a little bit. Then I can go. I'll go out there when I can offer maybe 4 or 5 grand over. But I'm not going out there where I have to offer 20, 30, 40, $50,000 over just so I can beat my competition out. So like I said, it all depends on where you're at and what your financial goals are. And I think we're starting to see more listings out there, creep up on the market. We're seeing days on market go up, right? So I think we're starting to see a more of a healthier balance take place.
Yeah, I think that the fear that some sellers have had over the last couple of years is it can be a little bit more moderated, about, yeah, I can still do this. Like, I'm still going to get a good price. I'm not going to, have to go under market or anything when I'm selling. And I have a better chance of being able to find something without having to go crazy over. Because people that were offering ridiculous amounts over and not having a house to sell, like, that was just insane in my personal view. Because like you said, it was money to just get rid of competition so you can get something. And yet, if you were selling a house, you were probably making it up on the sale side of it if you had to go do that on the purchase side of it. Now, as things are starting to slow a little bit more, you're probably not going to get that much more on the sale of your house, but you're also probably not going to have to offer that much more to get the next house. So it kind of balances out, in a lot of respects, if you're selling and buying at the same time.
Yeah, and I always tell sellers, like I said, real estate is kind of forensic. You can have a forensic view of real estate. I always tell sellers, they say, hey, well, this person got $520,000 for theirs, and that was 3 or 4 months ago. So I should be able to get the same for mine. And theoretically, yeah, you should. But what people don't quite understand is that buyer out there for you? Is that pool of buyers out there? Is that one buyer out there for you who sees your house, that falls in love with it, and is willing to pay you what you want for that home? A lot of it has to do with timing. It's not always about you're going to get that awesome offer that you saw the other seller get. It's all about timing. Who's out there at the time that you put your home on the market? That's the reality of it, whether you like it or not. What pool of buyers are out there who are looking at your home, going to fall in love with it, and are going to give you what you want for it? And that varies depending on when you put your house on the market.
Some of the stuff that makes this industry so fun. I had to figure that all out.
Yeah, it is. We can strategize to the best of our ability. But what I always let sellers know too is really the market determines the value of the home. We just try to give you all the information you need to price it where you want to price it at, but the market's going to tell you what your home is worth. Now, you have control over that. We talked about earlier, some small upgrades, putting a couple $1,000, cleaning things up, making sure your house is clean. That is a huge difference, So there's things you can do to have an impact on that pool of buyers out there too as well. So like I said, there's so many different moving parts that it's never just one size fits all. But I find it interesting when I hear other agents, oh yeah, this is all you have to do. I'm just like, yeah, it's kind of oversimplifying it for me, but I'm more technical and more, what's the word I'm looking for? Practical, theoretical about how we approach, what we do. There's more to it than just one size fits all. So I like to talk about those things and make sure the seller and my client understand those aspects of it, because the real estate process and the transaction can just do this. Sometimes you get it where they go like this and they're just perfect all the way through, and those are the ones you cherish. But there's ones where literally one roof tile can blow the whole thing up, because I've had it happen before. So
yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's real estate. It has people involved in it, and whenever you get people involved in it, you just never know which direction it's going to go, because
you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars too on top of that. So it's people with large sums of money at risk, and you put those two things together, and it can be a powder keg waiting to explode. So like I said, having the right agent that knows how to work across the other aisle with the other agent, knowing how to be professional, and caring about everyone in the process. Your fiduciary responsibility is to your client, but that doesn't mean that you have to be rude or ignore or be mean to the other party as well. Like for me, part of taking care of my sellers and taking care of my buyers is presenting myself in the most professional manner as possible, and making sure that the other side understands that we're working all collectively in the party's best interest. That's what gets things done. And I feel like when you ask me one of those unknowns early on, I think that's the part of real estate that people can't see. It's the intangibles. It's those little things that people like myself do to make sure that the process is going the way it needs to go. Whether my clients know what I'm doing or not, I'm still working in the best interest of the parties so we can close the transaction.
That's the thing. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's something that I think gets lost a lot of times, whether it's on the side of the consumer or the agents. It doesn't need to be an adversarial relationship between the agents and the buyer and seller, because ultimately everybody wants the same thing. Sure, everybody wants to, get the best deal that they can, whatever side you're on with it. But, somebody has a house to sell, somebody wants to buy that house, let's work together as a team to work through whatever things might pop up to get everybody to the finish line and happy. Because, you're not going to have a good transaction if you've got one side pissed off and the other side happy. Like, you're going to have a good transaction when both parties are happy, and you have less things pop up after closing too, if everybody's gone into it with the right idea, looking out for both parties and making sure that we're, coming together on things.
That's extremely, extremely important. I mean, it really, really is. And, I may come across an agent who may be somewhat standoffish when we first meet each other, but by the time we're done, we'll definitely be on the same page and we'll be working together. I don't do business any other way. And if it gets to the point where I have an agent who just simply cannot understand what's important in the transaction, then, I'll do the best I can to help them. And if I can't help them, then I'll do everything within my influence to offset their lack of collectively working together. Because, like I said, at the end of the day, if you're a good agent, the first thing that you will understand is it literally has nothing to do with you. I don't care about how many sales you make every year. I don't care about your ego. I don't care how cool you think you are. That's great for you. But when you have two parties here that want the home, that, like you said, that want to buy and want to sell, it has nothing to do with us. We're just simply facilitating the process to the best of our ability for these individuals who deserve that. That's their right. By selecting me, they have the right to have someone represent them in a way where we're doing everything within our influence to make them happy and to accomplish their goals. That's the least the buyers and sellers deserve. That's the minimum.
Well, I think you've done a really good job at illustrating the differences between agents out there and how important it is to choose the right one. I appreciate, all the information that you've shared. If somebody is interested in talking with you and maybe hiring you to buy or sell a home, how would they get in touch with you?
Well, so first of all, I pretty much work. I mean, this is going to be a podcast. It's going to go out on YouTube. I mean, we're in Arizona. So, I pretty much work the East Valley of Arizona. So you can get a hold of me by, my first name is Dayton. My last name is Toombs. My email address is daytontoombs@gmail.com. So DaytonToombs@gmail.com. And I can be reached at 480-296-9469.
Awesome. And if you guys decide to reach out to Dayton, I promise you will have a good experience. I work with Dayton a lot, and he's a class act and he knows what he's doing. So I appreciate you coming on with me, Dayton. Hope you had a good time.
I did. Thank you for having me on.
All right, you guys, look forward to seeing you guys next time.
Thanks for joining us. And please remember to go and subscribe, like, share, all that cool stuff to help us grow. And come back tomorrow to listen to our next episode. Until then, go out and live life uncensored.
Thanks for listening to the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast. Don't forget to help us out and subscribe. Follow and give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. And check us out on YouTube for the full video podcast. If you want more information on any of the topics discussed on today's episode, email us at uncensoredrealestatepodcast@gmail.com or give the Cardenas Mortgage Team a call at 480-331-4684.